What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Saturdays in the SEC, episode 121. We're back tonight for part four of our SEC preview series. Got a couple former SEC East teams tonight. One in Vanderbilt, kind of in a rebuild mode. Clark Lea trying to get that program off the ground a little bit, and then we have Missouri tonight that is coming off an 11-2 season. A team that's got uh, bona fide college football playoff expectations there, a lot of returnees. So we're going to get into both of those teams here tonight. But first, I'd be remiss not for us not to talk about the new college football 25 video game. Now that we've had a couple nights to play it, Carden, I got to get your thoughts on it. What have you thought of it so far, and has it kind of lived up to your expectations?
It's exceeded my expectations, honestly. I love the game. Obviously been playing it since it came out. I got the version, the deluxe, where I could get I mainly bought the deluxe just so I could get the 3 days early play. I mean, guys that bought the regular standard version, those poor guys still aren't able to play. They can't play for 2 more days. So I absolutely got it where I could get a couple more early days of gameplay, but it is everything that I wanted it to be and more. I thought that I wasn't going to like the Road to Glory not starting out in high school, but I actually enjoy it. I enjoy it a lot. It's actually still pretty good. I mean, I wish you could still play high school ball, but I enjoy the way they did it. I think that the gameplay is so realistic. It like in NCAA 14, God rest that game's soul. I played many hours. I logged many hours. It was over 4,000 days of game played on it, like as a total available to play. It's like 4,000 something days. So it served its purpose for sure. But when you were playing that game, the movements of the players and the way that things were going, you could tell it was still a video game for sure. Like, no, I didn't hate it, loved it, played the hell out of it. But you could tell it was still a video game. If someone was to walk in and watch me play this game that doesn't watch a whole lot of college football, they would honestly think that a real game was on. I mean, it looks so real. The graphics, as real as the players look, the fans in the stands look just as real. The detail to the stadiums, every stadium, the details down to a T are amazing. The pregame stuff they have inserted in the game, Auburn's got the Eagle flight, they got the Howard's Rock and Clemson running down the hill and things like that. They show the guys running down the tunnel, slapping the sign in Notre Dame down the stairs and stuff like that. So it's extremely electric, but there's just the minuscule details that they've added. You can hear like when the song's playing in the stadium, you can hear it, but it sounds loud, but also not super loud. Like you can tell that you're hearing it from the player's perspective or whatever. I don't know. And then the PA, when the PA's talking, it kind of sounds a little muffled, like you're at the game, like it's not right up on you, but like you can tell it's there, but in the distance, I don't know. It's hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but everything about it. But the gameplay is great. It's not a Madden reskin at all. It plays really smooth. It's extremely difficult. I started out playing on varsity, and it's rookie or freshman varsity, All-American, Heisman is what it is, same as the old games. I started out playing on varsity just to get a feel for it. Then I bumped it up to All-American. Let me tell you, when you bump it up to All-American, you better be locked in. You better be ready to go because it is tough. I went from throwing like one interception every 5-6 games to throwing like 4 interceptions a game in All-American. I'm just telling you, it's super realistic. It's super realistic. It's extremely hard. But I do like when you're playing your dynasty, if you lose a game, so what? It's a 12-team playoff. As long as you got, one loss and you got a good schedule and stuff, you still can make it, or 2 losses in a power conference, you can still make it. So I like the realistic vibes of it. And it's not you're not going to go out there and drum every team you play like you did in 2014. Like, it's dogfights. You're going to have to earn it.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. It's definitely lived up and exceeded my expectations for it. I like what you said. The gameplay really smooth. Like the running animations look way more realistic.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
guys, getting tackled looks way more realistic than in the past. And obviously, so I mean, we're well advanced. I mean, it's been over 10
11
years.
years.
So obviously things are going to be, a lot more advanced. But like you said, the detail of the presentations to me, like you said, the stadiums, the entrances of all the teams, it's specific to each one. There's not two entrances that are the same. Like you said, you've got, Clemson coming down the hill. One of the first games I went to was at Penn State because I wanted to hear Mo Bamba and the "We Are Penn State" and what's that, whiteout entrance
Yeah.
and stuff. It was amazing. Tennessee's running through the tee, coming out onto the field like they do. Like you said, the eagle flying, that was one of the first ones I kind of want to see too. So, yeah, it's just traditions that are unique to each school. And like you said, the way the sound's set up with the stadiums and the PA systems, all that, like the detail is like really incredible. So I was super impressed with. I mean, the gameplay, obviously, I'm super impressed with, but just like the presentations of it and the entrances, like that to me was the most like impressive thing about it.
And
That was so cool to me.
the versatility of all the different playbooks. There's so many different plays in the game, and each school's playbook is, I mean, there's a couple of plays that are same here and there depending on the type of offense, but each school's playbook is like specific for that school. Not every school runs the same plays like you did in 2014. You know what I mean? Like it's not just a base package. It's so many different plays and different variables you can play with in the game and change your schemes up and stuff. So I really like it. Shout out, or not shout out, just a heads up to people who are wondering or trying to find some offenses to run that they like. SMU, incredible offense. USC, incredible offense. I don't really like Auburn's main offense. It's not that good to me. I haven't been playing with them a whole lot, though. But USC and SMU, those offenses, out of this world.
Yeah, I did want to make one final point on like so I've been playing on All American since I got because that's what the online play is set to All American. So like if you're playing somebody online, that's automatically what it's set to. Not sure if you can change it, but anyways, I've been playing that in Dynasty and I started a road to Gory, 5-star quarterback. He's kind of more of a scrambler. So I wanted to go somewhere I could start, day one, because you start around a 79, 80
Yeah.
overall. So, and obviously I want to play in the SEC because I want to play, the best teams and toughest schedules. So I went to South Carolina and I'm a couple games in, but it's tough. Like you said, I had to switch the playbook around because their playbook wasn't the play. So early on in Road to Glory, like if you're a quarterback, you can change a few plays, but you're getting the coach's plays coming in,
Yeah.
which I kind of like because that's realistic. Because like you're not going to give a first time freshman starter the entire playbook necessarily.
Right.
So I kind of like that little aspect to it, but I did have to change up some playbooks because it wasn't really fitting my quarterback's style. But their offensive lineman, I'm gonna have to get the ball out of my hands in a hurry, dude. The pass rushes are coming.
It jumps. So I played the first game, my very first. Just I played an exhibition, played it on varsity, and then I played my first game of Road to Glory on varsity. And then after that, I was like, all right, I'm fine. I bumped it up to All American. It's like the offensive line forgets how to block, and the defense blitzes every play. Is what it seems like. You can't run a play action when you're on All American, because when you're done with the fake right before you start your drop back, you're getting hit. I mean, the play actions are worthless when your offensive line's that garbo. Because when you turn on All American, the defensive line turns into some dogs, dude, and they're on you every play.
Well, if it's any indication, so like I said, I'm going into my third game as my freshman season of South Carolina. I just started it. So they play Kentucky week 2 with Deion Walker, probably one of the best D linemen in the game. Dude, you talk about having to get the ball out of my hands in a hurry, dude. Like, I mean, I was having to throw screens and everything. I think we ended up winning the game like 24-22, but I got sacked like 7 times. It was terrible. Um, but anyways, yeah, all in all, though, the game's awesome. So, I mean, I'm sure most of you who are listening to this, you probably already played it by this point. I'm sure y'all probably feel the same. One change I'd like to see, though, is so I used Alabama in my first couple games, like I said, just getting into it, getting used to it, and they have Graham Nicholson, who's the highest rated kicker in the game. So the kicking wasn't too bad. If you're using almost anybody else, the kicking meter is so tough. Like I missed like 3 extra points my first game because
It's
it
hard.
was moving so quick. I couldn't even get it lined up correctly. And it was kind of windy too in the game I was playing in. So yeah, the kicking, I'd like to see them patch that a little bit and make it a little bit easier because
Yeah,
like if you
it's
don't
tough.
have a good kicker, it's like nearly impossible to hit a 4 yard field goal. I feel like.
That's the thing that I'm really going to like about this game though, in the system it's on. They're going to be able to go on there and make updates and change some things and nitpick some certain things and make the game better as the time goes on. So it's not the game we have right now is only going to get better because they're going to be able to patch some things and change some things in the future, which is I love that.
Yeah, I mean, like you see other games, do season updates all the time. Like they're going to be able to upgrade, update rosters if need be. Um, yeah, like you said, be able to patch a few things. So that's what I'm excited about. Is like if they just released it and it's already this good,
Yeah.
they're going to be able to make a few tweaks here and there based on feedback that they get from people playing it. And yeah, I mean, all in all, good job, EA Sports. Y'all
Absolutely.
nailed it. A lot of fun. So, uh, like I said, we had to comment on that. It's just obviously it's one of the biggest topics right now of this week. I mean, y'all are actually getting this podcast a little bit later due to the fact that it came out
Yeah.
Monday. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so yeah, hope y'all enjoy that. And if you haven't played it yet, definitely encourage y'all to do so. But we're going to kind of get into our previews, though. We're going to start off with Vandy. Um, as I said, obviously a program that's really been rebuilding. I mean, obviously, we know, as SEC football fans, how tough of a job that is. It's really hard to win at a high level there. I mean, even a decent level there. Somebody like James Franklin, I've always kind of defended James Franklin a little bit because
Yeah.
you hear a lot of talk about him, being overrated at Penn State, can never get over the hump. But I mean, this was a guy that did about as well as you could do at Vanderbilt. So I'll always view him as a very good head coach because um, I'll always be impressed what he was able to do at Vanderbilt. With that program, and like I said, we know how tough of an SEC football job that is, the toughest in the conference. So, um, kind of what's your initial thoughts on the Vanderbilt roster and just their schedule and kind of outlook as a whole?
Well, on their roster, I think they're going to be about the same as last year. Maybe a little better in certain places, but definitely worse at the receiver position. But Clark Lea, at the end of the season last year, he overhauled the coaching staff. Got a bunch of new guys in there. Went out and got New Mexico State's offensive coordinator Tim Beck. He's now in. Also got Diego Pavia, and got him in as transfer quarterback from New Mexico State, and famously known last year for dominating Auburn, beating them 31-10. So we got that offensive coordinator and that quarterback in there, and he's going to take over the defense coordinator role. Former defense coordinator at New Mexico State at Notre Dame. So he's going to take over that role, returning some guys, returning some linebackers and some DBs, but really he took a big hit on the transfer portal. Lost a lot of guys on the offense, a lot of receivers, and so he went out and got some guys in the transfer portal. But this schedule, man. I mean, I know it's an SEC schedule. It is what it is, but it's definitely backloaded for sure. If they're going to have a chance to win any games, it's going to be in the first 5 weeks or first 4 weeks, excuse me, because when week 5 hits, they got Ball State. Other than that, it's pretty rough. I mean, Virginia Tech, Alcorn State, Georgia State, Missouri. Missouri's going to be tough too. It's not like it's a piece of cake, but then you got Alabama, Kentucky, Ball State, Texas, Auburn, South Carolina, LSU, Tennessee. So really, after their first 3 weeks, if they go 3-0 their first 3 weeks, they might win one more game. But I'm just realistically, last year they were 2-10. I think they're going to be 2-10 again this year. Ceilings 3-9. I think Alcorn State, Georgia State, and Ball State is your 3 wins. Maybe South Carolina. They're going to look a little bit better. I think he's got enough talent to go to make him better than he was roster wise last year through the portal. But I just they're so far behind, man. They've been far behind since they became a program. It seems like when it comes to talent on the roster. So I hope they give Clark Lea a little bit of time because who else are you going to go get and what better job are they going to do? But I mean, he's just handcuffed, man, because everybody he does get that comes in and he develops, they dip out to the portal. We just saw that, like I talked about, with the 4 transfer wide receivers. So
Yeah.
it's tough being in a place like Vandy and the conference that they're in because they're in the power conference, but they're honestly as good as a Big 12 school. I mean, if we're being real. And that's the middle of the pack, bottom of the pack Big 12 school. So it's tough being in this conference because the guys that you do get that do produce and are highly talented, they're going to transfer out and go to a Big 10 or another power school in the SEC. So it's tough being a place like that, especially in today's world where you can transfer willy-nilly. You can't really keep your homegrown talent. So he's going to have to go through the portal, I feel like, to really build his roster in the future to sustain anything. And we're going to see if his portal pickups were any good this year or this coming season. But I just, man, with the new roster, or excuse me, with the new schedule and how everything's going this year, I don't feel like it's going to be that much of an uptick, if any. Maybe, like we said with Mississippi State, you're gonna see it as the product. It's probably going to look better, but the outcome and the results are probably going to be about the same.
Yeah, I agree with you. They brought in, as you mentioned, Tim Beck from New Mexico State. When I was looking down the roster, I was like, man, they brought in a lot of guys from New Mexico State, and then um, I was like, oh yeah, Tim Beck came in
Yeah.
from New Mexico State, so I was like, that makes a little bit more sense because I was like, man, because they had like 5 or 6, New Mexico State transfers. I was like, that's kind of odd, for one school, random school like that, but obviously make some sense there. He's does run some pro style schemes, but he also does they have some unique kind of formations to. I think that will help this offensive line a little bit. That's got so many new portal pieces in. Um,
He said they're going to run a weak side and a strong side of the offensive line. So no matter what side of the field they're on, they can have the weak side and the strong side for their running backs to run behind, which is strange. So I guess
yeah,
their tackles and guards are going to flip flop throughout the game, depending on the side what hash they're on.
I guess so. I mean,
That's what it sounded like to me.
unheard of in college football, really. I
Yeah.
mean, it's definitely extremely unique. But like you said, they got Diego Pavia coming in from New Mexico State. Him and Nate Johnson, who was a quarterback from Utah, that played a little ball out there. That's got some experience. So those guys are gonna, battle for the start quarterback job. And I'd give Diego Pavia the upper hand just because of the familiarity with the offense, obviously. But I do think Nate Johnson's going to get some run as well. I think they'll utilize him a good bit. Um, but like I said, the keys are that offensive line. As you mentioned too, they brought in some pieces from the portal. Uh, a wide receiver from Texas Tech. Darian Wiley from Nevada, Jeremiah Dillon, who we know a little bit from Ole Miss. So they got a couple guys, Junior Cheryl, Quincy Skinner, who've been there and played some ball. So yeah, going to need some transfers to be immediate impacts at those positions. Eli Stowers, tight end coming in from New Mexico State as well. So I think some familiarity with the quarterback and the offensive coordinator that'll certainly help things. But like you said, they definitely need to make up their ground early if they want to, pick up a couple wins here. As you said, Virginia Tech, that's not an easy opener at all. I mean, I think Virginia Tech's kind of a sneaky team in the ACC, so I mean they're not going to be favored in that game. You got Alcorn State at home, who you should beat. At Georgia State, that's not an easy game either. Um, Before you get into SEC play, and then you got an absolute gauntlet after that. At Missouri, Alabama at Kentucky. You're playing ranked team after ranked team. At Auburn, Texas, obviously. And then So I mean, South Carolina. I mean, I would say if they win a conference game, I'm not predicting them to, but I think that home game against South Carolina is the only one that there's a real, I mean, even an outside chance of happening, even though I don't see that. Because South Carolina, they normally play their better football towards the end of the season. So that's probably the only one where there's an outside chance. But even that, I don't expect. So, um, I don't think they're going to get an SEC win. Um, I think, like you said, 2-10, 3-9. They may get the three states: Georgia State, Ball State, and Alcorn State.
Yeah.
Um, but like you said, that Georgia State game's pretty tough. That's a tricky, a kind of a unique road trip, especially for SEC teams. So, like you said, I agree with your assessment. Though I do feel like the roster's better, the product will be a little bit better, but it's not substantial enough to really see the results on the field. Because when you're playing, 6 or 7 ranked SEC games, um, it's tough sledding in this conference to make up ground when you're already behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, on defense, they return Langston Patterson, C.J. Taylor, Jericky Wright. They got Randon Fontanet, I believe is how you say his last name, at a TCU. Dante Carter, and then they return, or they got out of the transfer portal. They got Marlon Jones, Colby Taylor, Kadore Sidner, and Zaylen Wood. So they went out and got a lot of guys on the defense side of the ball because the last few years, I mean, we've seen there's been basically no get after the quarterback from Vanderbilt's defense. There's been bad coverage. I believe they were 109th last year in defense or something along those lines, or in yards per attempt allowed. Yeah, so it's been terrible. So they went out and they got some guys out of the portal that are expected to come in and make immediate impacts. But I mean, like we've talked about, having an immediate impact on a defense that's had no impact the last 3 years is not that hard to do. So how much of a bump are they really going to make? They went out and got the guys, but can those guys produce, and can they get over the hump and get to bowl eligibility? With this schedule, man, it's going to be tough sledding to get that to happen. But I mean, realistically, absolute best case scenario, Clark Lea out coaches himself and does wonders that nobody can imagine. It's probably going to be 4 wins. So I'm sitting here thinking 2-10 again, 3-9, 4-8, the absolute ceiling. But realistically, 2-10.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I would have the ceiling, at 4. Anything over that, you may have a parade coming by your place there in the outskirts of Nashville for Clark Lea in this Vanderbilt squad. Because he may be a coach of the year nominee if he goes, if he's over 4. But I will say too, with the defense, I think them retaining Ricky Wright, I think will be certainly helpful. I believe he entered the portal at one point. They were able to get him to return, so I think that's big. And it's interesting too that Clark Lea, like he is the defensive coordinator, like his fingerprints are going to be on this defense. So I do think him being that much more involved, with the day to day, practice plans, game plans. Even though he was already involved as a defensive minded head coach, but I think him to kind of take that responsibility over even more so, I think will probably be helpful to them. But like you said, yeah, it's just you either match up in talent or you don't. I mean, it's you can only coach so much. Like you got to have the talent to match up in this league, and they're not on that level to the vast majority of teams in this conference. So it's hard. It's tough sledding when you just don't really have the athletes to match up with, the top, 9, 10, 11 teams or more in this conference. So, I mean, they just don't have that caliber of athlete there, and it's going to be tough sledding for sure, like I said. But maybe they'll be able to outperform a little bit and surprise, and maybe hit that ceiling of theirs.
Still going to rep you, though. Even though you aren't going to be good, I know this is a baseball reference, but I'm repping the Vandy hard.
No, I love to see them do well. Like I said, I just until it's proven, it's just you look at the talent on paper and it's like, it's hard to imagine really overachieving a ton there. And just considering the schedule too, man. When you're playing this level of talent week in, week out, it's tough sledding. But good home schedule though. Or I mean, as far as quality of teams coming in, Alabama's there at home, Texas is at home. You've got Tennessee there at home. Um, Boy, that place is going to be orange the last week of November. But yeah, I mean, you got uh, Virginia Tech coming in, so very good home schedule there. So quality teams coming in. So you never know. I'm curious to see it play out.
Absolutely. Want to move on to Missouri. I mean, honestly, looking at their schedule, very, very manageable schedule. And, tough schedule, obviously, it's in the SEC, but a very, very manageable schedule. I think that offensive-wise, they're going to be pretty much the same. We got Brady Cook coming back, got Luka Burden coming back, probably arguably the best receiver in the SEC, one of the best receivers in the country, and Luka Burden coming back. You return basically all of your wide receivers. You got Theo Weiss coming back, Mookie Cooper, Brett Norfleet coming back. Four of your receivers from last year are going to be back. Going to have to replace the running back. They went out and got two other transfer additions. Their last Cody Schrader ended up leading the SEC in rushing coming out of D2. They went and got Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll to come in and play running back for them. They're expecting them to carry most of the load. So I think offensive-wise, they're going to look a lot pretty much the same, pretty much identical, rinse and repeat from last year. Defense is where it's going to get shaken up. Obviously offensive-wise too, that their coordinator returns. So that's always a plus. Defensive-wise, though, they lost a lot of guys to the draft. So it's going to be tough. They're going to have to patch a bunch of places up. They return only 5 defensive starters, or really 4. So that side of the football is going to look a lot different this year. They really came off in the last 5-6 weeks of their season, played really, really great defense. In their last 6 games, they did not allow more than 14 points. So they were locked down defensively last year. Had 4 guys go in the draft. 1 guy was a first rounder. So a lot of high talent to replace. So I think that they're not going to be able to shut down teams the way they did at the end of last season. I think it's going to be some shootouts with them. But he's been recruiting well. Eli Drinkwitz has been recruiting extremely well. He went out and got some guys in the portal for the defense to patch those holes. But I'm expecting, 10-2, potentially 11-1. I mean, you look here, you open up your first 4 weeks, you're probably going to be undefeated. You're probably going to go to College Station 4-0. Texas A&M, that's going to be a really, really good game. Could go either way, so we'll say it's a loss. You bounce back, you probably beat UMass, probably going to beat Auburn, probably lose to Alabama, so that's 2 losses. I like them against Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas. Probably winning out there. So I gave them 2 losses just off the cuff at A&M and at Alabama. Both of those being on the road, that's going to be tough. Being able to host Oklahoma is big for them. And then their last 3 games, not super superior teams when it comes to roster and talent. So I think that they're 100% going to be in the playoffs this year. I mean, you're a 10-2 SEC team. You're making the playoffs, or you better make the playoffs. Show me another team. Show me 11 more teams that's better than them. You can't do it. So I think for sure playoff or bust, especially with how they played last year, going 11-2, dominating that bowl victory. So I think, and then dominating Tennessee too. That was incredible to watch. But I think coming off of the way they played and they ended last season, coming in basically returning your whole offense, I think they're expected to do the same exact thing as last year. So 10-2 in the regular season, and that punches them a ticket to the playoffs for sure. Probably around a 8 to 12 seed, maybe 9 to 12 seed. So I think vibes are high down there for Drinkwitz. I think for sure if he can get to 10-2 going into the bowl or going into a playoff, I think recruiting is going to skyrocket for him. I think he's done well in recruiting, and he's already skyrocketed from what we were used to Missouri being. But if he can punch a ticket to the playoffs this year, I think recruiting is going to go out the roof for him.
Yeah, I really like this team, like this roster, especially offensively. As you highlighted, a lot of guys returning the entire receiving core, led by Luther Burden, one of the best wide receivers in the country, but got some other really good pieces around him with Mookie Cooper, Theo Weiss, and that group. And then Brady Cook, obviously returning a guy that I think doesn't get enough flowers, honestly. Um, you know, when we were doing our SEC quarterback rankings, I kind of highlighted his stats compared to Quinn Ewers, and obviously, and rightfully so, Quinn Ewers is talked about. He's a great player, one of the better quarterbacks in the country. Um, but you don't hear about Brady Cook basically had the exact same season, and you don't hear him in that light as someone like a Quinn Ewers or some of those guys. And I think he's right there, in that conversation as well with the season that he had a year ago. Coming back with the weapons he's going to have at his disposal. Eli Drinkwitz being able to keep Kirby Moore there, the improvement they made from 2022 to 2023 on offense was a huge jump. They went from, I believe, in the 80s offensively to the top 30 last year. So a huge improvement year over year. I thought, too, this was a guy that when Ryan Grubb left Alabama after his 5-minute lunch break there when Kalen DeBoer got there, Kalen DeBoer has a lot of experience with Kirby Moore. Coached with him at Fresno State. He actually took over as offensive coordinator when DeBoer left Fresno State. So a lot of familiarity there. I thought he may be a real candidate to get the offensive coordinator job. Opted to stay at Missouri. So huge win there for Eli Drinkwitz and company. And he's done a fantastic job. And like I said, he's got a lot of weapons and pieces returning this year. I think they're going to be right there again as one of the more efficient offenses in the country. The big question, like I said, is defensively. Losing Blake Baker to LSU, the defensive coordinator, bringing in Corey Batoon, a guy that's been a defense coordinator at South Alabama for the last few years, coached under Kane Womack, who's now at Alabama. So a little connection there. As you said, went pretty heavy on the portal pieces defensively, especially in the defensive front seven, the defensive line. Guys like Sterling Webb, Chris McClellan from Florida, Zion Young from Michigan State, Darius Smith from Georgia, just to name a few. They brought in quite a bit of transfers in the front seven. Williams Nwaneri, a 5-star freshman, they think is going to step in and contribute right away. And I think with the openings there on that defensive front, there's an opportunity for him to do just that. So I think they're going to be fine defensively. And I think the good part about this team is offensively, I think they're going to be explosive enough that it's going to give the defense time to get their feet under them a little bit. Like you said, going towards midseason, those first 4 games are about as favorable as you could ask for, with Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vandy all in Columbia. So you're not leaving Columbia till October the 5th. So you play at College Station, which is one of the biggest swing games on their schedule. Obviously, an extremely tough place to play. One of those coin flip games that I like to call them. Kind of weird that you got a road trip to UMass, which is really strange.
Which is
then
a
obviously
tiny stadium, dude. The stadium is tiny at UMass.
Yeah, I don't know how that got on the schedule there, but I guess a little home and home maybe, but or a 2-1 situation maybe. But yeah, you got Auburn at home before you go to Bryant Denny, so pretty challenging October there. Um, but like I said, I think worst case you're looking at what 6-2 maybe. If the A and M and Alabama games doesn't go your way, and I think they've got a good chance in both those games. Like I think they're going to be right there. Um, I think they're a little bit better than A&M, but with it being at A&M, I think that's going to be a really close line. They're going to be a little bit of an underdog in Tuscaloosa, obviously on the road, um, but yeah, I think they're going to be right there, and I think their end of season schedule really works out well for them. I like where their bye weeks fall as well. Going into that A&M game, that's such an important game on that schedule, and really their first real tough challenge of the season. And then having that second bye week after the Alabama game, like I said, win or lose, having the off week at that point, especially going into that Oklahoma game, I think that's a perfect time for it after that 4 week stretch. So um, I like where their bye weeks fall. I like how the schedule is structured. And, as you said, this is as manageable as an SEC schedule gets. I mean, they probably have the most favorable SEC schedule, and it's still not easy by any means, um, but compared to the rest, I mean, it's definitely a lot more manageable than some others. So I like that bye week getting to regroup after Alabama. Um, like I said, at that point, say they are 6-2 hypothetically, that Oklahoma game obviously becomes
Yeah.
super super critical. Could make or break your playoff hopes at that point. That road trip to South Carolina though is tricky. As I noted earlier, South Carolina, Shane Beamer's teams, they typically play their best football um, in November towards the end of the season. I mean, ask Tennessee, ask 2022 Tennessee how they like going into Williams-Brice, in
Yeah.
late November. Um, they could spoil playoff hopes there. So that's definitely a tricky place. And even Mississippi State, who's probably going to be better at this point in the year. So um, even though those are two teams that are in the bottom half of the SEC. Still going to be two, fairly difficult road trips. Before you finish up with Arkansas, and we don't know really what they're going to be at that point. Could be Sam Pittman's last game. It could have already happened before that point, so we don't really know what they're going to be at that point. Probably looking for the off season, I would imagine at that point. But yeah, so I really like the schedule layout for Missouri, and I think you're right. I think they're what what's going to be so interesting to me is like I said, there is a legit 7 SEC teams I see making the playoff. Obviously, all of them are not going to make it. I see a cluster of teams being 10-2 in the SEC this year. I wouldn't be shocked if we don't have 4 SEC teams that are 10-2. I think that is a very realistic possibility. So that's why it's going to be so interesting which games, you have a little leeway now, but what games you lose are still going to be critical because, like you
Yeah.
said, I think it's going to be jumbled up, in the SEC standings at the end of the year. I see quite a few teams possibly being in that 10-2, 9-3 area. It's going to be really critical, which games you've won, which games you've lost, because there's going to be a lot of, comparing the resumes, because I think you're going to have a lot of similar teams there in a group when we get to the end of the regular season. So I think Missouri. I don't know if they're going to be in or not, but I think they're going to be one of those teams that are right there in the mix of borderline getting in or not getting in. Kind of like a Tennessee. You see, a team like Ole Miss in that situation, a team like Alabama in that situation a little bit. Um, you never know. Like if Texas loses a game or two, they're right there. So it's going to be insane. A team like Oklahoma. I mean, there's a chance Auburn makes a little bit of noise. Like, there's going to be a bunch of teams clustered up at the end of the regular season. So, who gets in and who doesn't is going to be fascinating to watch if it works out the way we think it might.
Absolutely. I think the most important stretch for Missouri is that 1 month stretch from October 5th to November 9th. I count it as a 1 month because they got an off weekend there. That's where your losses are going to come, to me. Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. If you don't lose to Texas A&M, I think you might lose to Oklahoma. I think that there's going to be 2 losses sprinkled in there.
Yeah.
In 5 games, 2 losses coming in 5 games. Can you weather that storm enough to get to the end of the season undefeated? So that's the most important stretch there. If they're able to get by Texas A&M, I feel like that's going to free them up a little bit to play a little more free in the back half of the schedule, knowing that they have, honestly, 2 losses to spare. So it's going to let them play a little more aggressive. So if they can get by Texas A&M at Kyle Field, I think that's huge. But not being able to get by them, if they lose to Alabama, you're right. That Oklahoma game, November 9th, is going to, that's going to make or break your season because you have 3 losses, you're not getting in. I don't care who else you beat. But that game right there, for all the marbles, 3-8, you can guarantee that if that game is going down for both Oklahoma or Missouri's could be their 3rd loss of the season, that's going to be an 8 p.m. kickoff for sure. That's primetime television. Give me my popcorn and give me a cold beer and let me sit down and watch this game. That's what I'm feeling that was going to shake out to be. I hope that that's what it shakes out to be. But imagine they do get by A&M, lose to Alabama, or lose to A&M, get by Alabama, and they go in there at, 8-1? Imagine what the crowd is going to be like at Missouri if they're an 8-1 team playing Oklahoma, because that fan base knows that if they can get by Oklahoma, it's pretty much smooth sailing the rest of the year, and they're probably guaranteed a top 6 or 7 place in the playoffs, and they have a potential to go play in Atlanta, being 11-1 in the SEC.
Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. That is going that's your season right there, that 1 month stretch. Give me your absolute worst case and give me your best case for Missouri. Like, what's your range of wins? Like I said, if things maybe don't go quite as expected, kind of what's your worst case scenario, and then what do you see as the ceiling for this Missouri team?
Worst case scenario, I'm saying 8 wins, and that's dropping a game to Auburn or South Carolina or Mississippi State or Arkansas. One of those 4 teams, it's dropping a game to one of those, because I think worst case scenario, you're losing one of those 4 games, but you're not losing all 4 of those games. I think you go worst case scenario in the Auburn, South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas series, you go 3-1, and that's worst case scenario. They should sweep all those games. They're better than all those teams. So worst case scenario is 8-4. I think. I think if they only win 7 games, I think Eli Drinkwitz's seat is right back red hot like it was last season. So I think worst case scenario is 8-4. Absolute best case scenario, 11-1, is what I think. I think it's a possibility. I think them and Ole Miss have the best possibility to go 11-1, but I think their schedule is a little more favorable because they don't have to play Georgia too. Ole Miss Ole Miss doesn't play either Bama or Georgia, excuse me, but Missouri not having to play Georgia definitely benefits them and gives them a favor of potentially going 11-1 because they have Oklahoma, not Texas.
What do you think the biggest trap game is on the schedule? Because I've got one in particular that's sticking out, and kind of already mentioned it. But what do you see as the
biggest trap game for sure? And I'll give you my reason why. Biggest trap game is at South Carolina because it's going to be a late evening game, and because it's after Oklahoma. So if you win that Oklahoma game, you're probably, like we said, you're either sitting at 8-1. Or if you win the Oklahoma game, you're either sitting at 9-1 or 8-2. So going into South Carolina, you're thinking, okay, we're going to the playoffs, because after that you got Mississippi State and Arkansas. No way they should be on the same field with you. So you're, as a fan, you're thinking, oh, we're probably going to the playoffs. This playoff or bust. As a player, you're thinking, oh yeah, we're in the playoffs now. We got South Carolina, Mississippi State, and Arkansas. We're in the playoffs. Then you go into South Carolina and you have that mentality. South Carolina is going to be the team that beats you.
Yeah, I do too. That screams trap game to me. Like that is one, especially like you said, say they're a one loss team or even a two loss team, say they're coming off, especially if they beat Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Like, man, that is such a trap spot the very next week. Like you said, coming off of that high, or even I mean, even if they like say that Oklahoma was like their second loss or whatever, like still I still think that's such a trap spot because like you said, like they're still going to be feeling good, thinking, oh yeah, we still got a great chance to be in the playoffs. And then like I said, I mean South Carolina completely spoiled Tennessee's season 2 years ago and beat the brakes off of them because I mean that was just a classic trap spot there late in the season, and South Carolina does that. That's when they typically play their best football. We've seen that several times. So yeah, definitely to me, um, that's a big try spot too. And I think too, I think Auburn's gonna have some confidence early in the season. I think their schedule lays out pretty well for them. So I mean, having that game right before going to Tuscaloosa, especially especially too if they're 5 or 6-0 at this point, like say they beat A&M. I mean that to me is a even though it's at home, that's kind of a look ahead spot too a little bit. And like Auburn could very
Yeah.
well have some confidence at this point in the year because their schedule lays out pretty well early as well.
And it benefits Auburn because it's a noon kickoff or 1 o'clock kickoff, whatever it is. It's not a night kickoff, so your fans don't have time to get the fun juice and get rowdy by the time kickoff happens. All the frats are out there drunk off their rear end. So being an early kickoff definitely benefits Auburn being on the road. So I agree with that. Auburn's. I don't think that they're going to just roll over Auburn and have their way with them, but I do think that they're probably, if they were to play right now, I bet Missouri would be like a 10.5 point favorite, 8.5 to 10.5 point favorite is what I would guess. I think that they're a touchdown or more better than Auburn right now. So a potential trap game, but being at home definitely helps them. It is before Alabama, so it's the thought of playoffs is not into their head quite yet. Now, if the Oklahoma and Auburn game were flip flop on the schedule, I don't think South Carolina would be as big of a trap game. But since it's where it is, that's 100%. That's where you could slip up and lose your playoff hopes if you're sitting at 8-2 or 9-1.
Yeah, I agree totally. But I think, at the end of the day, definitely one of the most manageable, if not the most manageable schedule. And that's why I feel highly about Missouri, especially what they have offensively. I think, as I stated earlier, will give that defense some time to get their feet under them with a new defense coordinator and a lot of new portal pieces there. So I'm excited to see this Missouri team play a lot of interesting games in that middle to late part of the season, and curious to see if they can, back up that 11-2 season with a possible, playoff berth, and that's certainly the expectations with Eli Drinkwitz and his staff and Missouri fan base as a whole. Just want to thank everyone for tuning in. Like I said, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Give us your feedback on both these teams, expectations, predictions. If you're a fan of either one of these squads, and we'll be back next week for part 5 of an 8-part preview series. And just be sure to follow us as well on Twitter at Saturday_SEC. And just appreciate you guys a ton. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll catch you guys next week.
Absolutely. Y'all have fun on College Football 25 and let us know how your dynasties are going.